Hi, let's work through the concept of procuring cause as a contract issue.
Procuring cause. Procuring cause is a doctrine among real estate professionals who are part of the multiple listing service, which rewards a broker's efforts to match a ready, willing, and able purchaser with the seller, and for a sale to take place because of the broker's continuous negotiation and/or involvement. Procuring cause states that if a broker introduced a buyer to the property, continue to work with the buyer in an uninterrupted manner, that broker deserves to be paid a commission as outlined in the multiple listing service agreement. Disputes about commission payments occur between brokers. They are not disputes between the sellers and brokers. Procuring cause disputes, on the other hand, are handled through dispute resolution arbitrated by the local realtor board. If a seller refused to pay a broker as agreed to within a listing agreement or a buyer-broker agreement, the buyer or the seller could be sued by the broker in court. All local realtor associations must, as a benefit of membership, offer the ability to mediate otherwise arbitral disputes. In some realtor associations, mediation is required prior to an arbitration hearing. There are many reasons to have procuring cause disputes, yet all cases come down to interpretation of the rule and the specific facts in the case. Many factors can influence a court or arbitration decision on procuring cause. A partial list from the National Association of Realtors Arbitration Manual highlights some of the most critical issues. These include the nature of the transaction, listing and buyer representation agreements, the offer of cooperation compensation, the conduct of the seller, the buyer, and the brokers and their affiliate licensees. the roles and relationships of the parties, the initial contact with the purchaser, and the continuity of contact. Some licensees mistakenly believe that just because the licensee introduced a buyer to a property, that they have earned the commission. It is much more complicated than that. Abandonment and estrangement between the buyer and the agent can negate the right to receive payment. Points of consideration for procuring cause cases. The nature of the transaction, such as the listing and buyer representation agreements. Offer of compensation, cooperative compensation. The conduct of the seller, the buyer, the brokers, and their affiliate licensees. Roles and relationships of the parties, and the initial contact with the purchaser, plus the continuity of contact, whether there has been abandonment and estrangement. Unfortunately, procuring cause cases are common. It comes down to multiple licensees believing that they each have the right to the commission. Believe it or not, I ended up in a procuring cause dispute with the very first real estate deal that I did back in Indiana as a brand new agent. You see, I had a buyer that was referred to me by a friend of the buyer. Just prior to the referral, the buyer had called the listing office of a listed house that she had noticed on her own and had asked through that phone call to see the house the next day. Then, before actually seeing the house, she and I connected over the phone. She decided to work with me, representing her as her buyer's agent. She called and canceled the showing for the house. But it turned out she left a message to cancel the showing rather than speaking with that other agent. I called the broker and scheduled an appointment myself to show the buyer the house. And I did set it up for the same time that the buyer had originally scheduled it because that was the time that was convenient for the buyer. The buyer showed up to the appointment a bit early and before I did. Unfortunately, the other agent was already there. She later claimed that she had not received the message about the canceled appointment. She was not the listing agent. She had been the agent who had answered the phone that day that the buyer had called about the house. The other agent did not introduce herself or provide any identification, such as a business card. She simply started showing the buyer the house. As an odd coincidence, the other agent was about my age, had red hair, as did I, and looked fairly similar to me. Although the buyer and I had not yet met, she had been given my business card with my picture on it. Excited, the buyer toured the house with the other agent, thinking it was me. When I showed up, I quickly figured out that the other agent had shown the buyer the house, and that the buyer thought that she was me. So I politely explained who I was and told the buyer that if she wanted to work with the other agent, that that was fine. I had a list of other houses for the buyer to see with scheduled appointments to follow the showing of this particular house, and told the buyer that she could see them either with the other agent or myself, whichever she chose. Unfortunately, before the buyer could even begin to make a decision, the other agent walked over to me and started literally screaming at me. And then she looked at the buyer and literally said to her that the only agent that that buyer could work with was her. This really upset the buyer. The buyer looked directly at me and said, "Help me. There is no way I am working with that woman. She's mean." So the buyer and I left, and I didn't have a chance to see the house as the other agent actually barred me from entering the home. The buyer and I spent the day seeing other houses, but at the end of the day, she decided to buy the first house that she had looked at. Now, the house that she saw that she wanted was the house that she saw with the other agent. But the buyer still refused to let the other agent write the contract. She wanted nothing to do with that other agent because of that other agent's behavior. I tried to go back to see the house with the client, but the broker of the listing refused to let me take the buyer back to see it. You see, the other agent had complained about me to her. My broker advised me to go ahead and write the contract, so I did. The offer was accepted. My buyer closed on the house, but instead of paying my broker the commission, the deal was disputed as a procuring cause case with the local association. I had no idea if I would even get paid, but honestly, I didn't care. When the other agent started yelling and caused the buyer to be upset, I agreed to help the buyer with or without payment. In the end, the procuring cause panel ruled in my favor, and the other broker was ordered to pay the commission. It was ruled that simply showing the house was not enough to establish procuring cause. The other agent had failed to establish an ongoing relationship with the buyer. Of course, the other agent argued that I had interfered with her ability to do so, but the buyer testified at the hearing and made it clear that it was her decision not to work with that agent based on that agent's behavior.